So if you're a nurse or a midwife in the UK and you want to keep your registration or you want to keep your name on the UK's Nursing and Midwifery Council register, there's a process you have to go through every 3 years. This process is called revalidation. You have to do this every 3 years to be able to keep your name on the UK NMC register as a nurse or a midwife. I'm due for my second revalidation. Yes, I did my first revalidation in 2021 because remember, I got my license to work as a nurse in the UK in 2019. So around 2021, I was due to revalidate. And then after that, this is my second revalidation. I'm due to revalidate by January. So I have just finished my second revalidation and I'm going to take you guys through the step by step exactly what you need. And I'm going to even show you some examples and some of my own things that I have written for my revalidation so that you won't panic. I will hold your hand, take you through, show you some of mine, and then, make it easy for you to do yours. So do not panic, just relax. It's easy. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Stop that. So to me, I would say that the revalidation is just a process for you to reflect on your practice in the last 3 years. Remember, it's the last 3 years of your work. So for me, I got my UK nurse license or my PIN around January 2019, right? So I was due to submit my first revalidation by January 2022. Yes, but I submitted it late 2021. Again, I'm due to submit my second revalidation by January of 2025, but I've just submitted it now. And I would explain all of that later. So it's the last 3-year period. It's reflecting on your practice in the last 3-year period. So for me, I'll be reflecting on my practice from 2022 or since my last revalidation until now. If you don't know when you are due to revalidate, usually the NMC will send you a reminder in your email. So for me, I have received so many reminders. So you have to go on your NMC online account and see the email you have put in as your email. If this is an email that you don't check regularly, I would advise you to update the email or update your contact details on there so that the UK NMC can send you reminders of when you are due. You can also go online and then just check or just calculate from when you got your PIN. 3 years to that. That's when you are due to revalidate. So let me also add that you should have submitted your revalidation by the first day of the month that your registration is due. So for me, my registration is due, I think somewhere around the 10th or 11th or 15th of January. So my deadline is 1st January of 2025. So by the first day of the month that your registration is due, that will be your deadline. However, there's a 60-day window. So you can submit as early as 60 days to the time. So that means for me, I'm quite early because we're still in November. I have the whole of December to submit. But I am using the 60-day window. So before the 60-day window, NMC will be sending you reminders. Let me read the email I received. So 6 months to my revalidation, NMC sent me this email. They said, 6 months until your revalidation. Dear Nanelle, there's 6 months to go until your revalidation. Remember that it's not about your fitness to practice. It's about developing, blah, 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 how to revalidate. So there's so much help in the email. And I think after that as well, they did send me another email to remind me that I'm still very close to my revalidation. So make sure that your email address on your NMC online account is updated so you can receive such reminders and that will prompt you to start. How much is it? So you don't really pay for your revalidation necessarily, but you know that you have to pay for the annual NMC fee that we all pay. So if you already have a direct debit set, I think it's a little over £100. So if you already have the direct debit set, you not necessarily pay anything. But however, if you do not have a direct debit set or you're not doing, frequent payments, once you submit your revalidation, they'll prompt you to put in your card details and then they can take that amount on the date that your registration is due anyways. So that's how much. So for me, I would say that the revalidation is in 2 parts. So there's a part that you have to sit down and do by yourself. And then there's another part you do on the NMC website where you confirm that you have done that part that you were supposed to do by yourself and then you submit. And then, like I said, if you already have your payment details on there for direct debits, there will be no issues. But if you do not have, then they will take your bank details so that when your registration is due, the day that you were due to submit it, then they will deduct the money. I hope you understand. So this whole revalidation thing was started in 2016 by the NMC. It was not there every time. So they want you to reflect on your practice in the last 3 years to see whether you are still going by the code of practice, to see whether you have done enough hours, to see whether you are keeping up to date with your professional development. Are you going for training? Are you doing enough hours as a nurse you claim you are? And then should the public still have confidence in you, in the last 3 years? So this revalidation also gives the public confidence that this is, keeping up to date with the professional developments, practicing safely and all of that and keeping up with the code. So basically, this is why they introduced this whole revalidation thing. However, if because of, let's say, sickness, because of any disability or anything like that, you are not able to submit your revalidation at the time that you are supposed to revalidate, it's not a problem at all. You can always request for an extension. extension. And is this really feasible? Yes, I know a couple of nurses back where I used to work. There was so much going on with them at the time, and they lost track of time that they were due to revalidate, so they could not revalidate on time. So they just requested for an extension. There's an email that you apply to, and then you explain why, and they were granted an extension. I don't know if it was about 8 weeks extension or whatever. You give your reason. I think their reason at that time was COVID and family and a whole lot of that. So they were given an extension. So you can't get an extension, because the thing is that if you do not revalidate, you do not ask for an extension, and then your time lapses and you are overdue, your name will be taken off the NMC register, and then you have to reapply and go through a whole other process, and then before your name is put back. I don't think it's worth it. You have 3 whole years to start planning for this, so it's not a bother at all. So now let's go on to the requirement. So first of all, I'll say that you need an NMC online account. I know that everybody has an NMC online account, definitely, but if you do not have, you'd have to create one, an NMC online account, so that you can do the second part that I mentioned. Remember, I said the first part is you sitting down and filling all those forms, and then the second part is you confirming that you have done all that on the NMC website. So you need an NMC online account to do the second part. All right, so you should meet these requirements before you can revalidate. So the first thing is 450 practice hours, or 900 hours if you are renewing 2 registrations. So for some people are registered nurses, and then they are midwives as well, or they are mental health nurses stroke something else. So if you're renewing 2 registrations, you should have at least met 900 for one of the registrations and 900 for the other one. But in general, if you're only renewing just 1 registration, you should have at least done 450 practice hours in the last 3-year period. Remember, it is not the last year, it's the last 3-year period. So if, let's say, you do the normal 37.5 hours a week, in a month you should have done 150 hours in a month, and in 12 months you should have done 1,800 hours. So that is way more than that. So if you're doing the normal 37.5 hours, you meet this in some few months, but you have to calculate based on some people just do 1 shift a week. And so if you're doing 1 shift a week, how many is it? How many hours have you done in the entire 3-year period? Remember, it's the entire 3-year period. So most people are going to meet this. So 450 practice hours in the last 3-year period. And then you also have to prove that you have done at least 35 hours of CPD, including 20 hours of participatory learning. So the 35 hours of CPD could be your company's e-learning. It could be trainings that were, offered to you by your employer. It could be trainings that you booked yourself and all of that. It could even be your personal learning. But remember, out of the 35 hours of CPD learning, you should have done 20 hours participatory. So an e-learning cannot be considered as participatory. Participatory is when you were present and then you could participate, you could ask questions, you could see, you could hold, you could feel. So that will be participatory. An example is, let's say you did a moving and handling training where you went there, you were present in the classroom, there was a teacher there, you were showed how to use the hoist, you were showed how to use the Sarah Steady and all of that. That will be participatory. You were able to ask questions and they were answered. If you go for venipuncture and cannulation training where you use the dummy as practice and all of that, that will be considered as a participatory. So you need 35 hours of learning in general, but at least 20 of them should be participatory to be able to meet this requirement. The next requirement will be 5 pieces of practice related feedback. So with this one as well, they want to see the good, the bad, the ugly, or any feedback that you got. It could be a good feedback, it could be a not so good, it could be a very unpleasant feedback. However, the main thing they want to know is what you learned from the feedback and how it is going to change your practice after that incident. We'll go into details with that, so stay tuned. Right, then the next one is 5 written reflective accounts. So that is my least favorite part, because you have to write and write and write and write. So that is the 5 written reflective accounts, and then with everything you're going to link them back to the code, and we'll go to that later as well with examples. And then a reflective discussion. So you'd have to reflect and have a discussion with another NMC registered nurse or another health professional. You go through everything and you reflect and discuss everything that you have written in your revalidation, and then contemplate on and reflect on everything that has happened, and you have a conversation about it. And then there's a health and character declaration as well. In the last 3-year period, have you had any issue with the police? Have you had any issues with the court? Are you still fit health-wise to practice? Do you have anything that NMC should be aware of, and all of that? And be very careful when you're filling this part. I've done a video about this where a nurse take that, she's okay to go. She forgot to state that she had an issue with the court and she had been fined, or just because of a train fare. Remember that video? I'll leave it here so you can watch. So if you had any issues with the police or anything like that, do well to declare it there. And then professional indemnity arrangement. Do you have a professional indemnity arrangement in place? Most employers have this in place. And if you're, let's say, an agency worker, or you don't have this in place, are you registered with a union or something like that? you tick it. And then confirmation. Has anybody who is a senior or another registered colleague gone through everything to see that you have really done everything you say you have done? You confirm, and then that will be it. And then you go ahead and you pay your annual registration fee, or you put in your card details, and once you are due to pay your annual registration fee, they'll just take it. So let me say that this is quite simple, right? Doing it a second time, it was even more simple. So let's go through the step by step. So I would say that you just have to go through the NMC website. Or when you go on Google, just type NMC revalidation. And then when the page of the revalidation comes out, you would actually see forms or templates. So the NMC themselves, they have given you templates with examples. And what I like about the example is that it's not just a registered nurse example. They gave some for midwives, even people in the cosmetic sector. You know, there are some nurses who are in the cosmetic industry and all they do is, let's say, give Botox and infusions for, you know, all these beauty therapies and all of that. So they give examples for that sector as well, and every other sector. So I'm going to show you how the forms or the templates look like on the screen so you can see it for yourself. So for me, the very first revalidation that I did just before 2022, I printed out all these forms. In fact, my company had a file that they would give you with all the forms already printed. So it was like something like this with my company's logo and everything, but obviously I can't show you my company's name. So at the time, the company I was working for, they would give you a file like this with all the forms in it. So you can buy some of these things yourself at the nearest shop and then print out the forms, and then you can do a handwritten one. So my first revalidation was handwritten, and I love it so much. It's so dear to my heart. So you print out the forms from the NMC website and you input it there, and then you can just handwrite everything. The second revalidation that I did, honestly, I did it online, and to me it was much quicker. So I didn't do the second one on this one. It was much quicker. So you can choose to do whichever one you want. So let's go through the example. So we'll go through one example from the NMC website, and then we'll go through one example from one of my revalidations that I have done, or an example that I have done for the video. So let's look at the first part of it. So the first part is proving that you have met the 450 practice hours. So this is how it looks like. Practice hours log template. So first of all, they have written a guide on how you can complete this part, and then they've given examples of work settings, and then they've also given examples of scopes of practice and then registration. So the first part, you'd have to write where you have been working, but make sure that the most current one comes first, and then you put the name and the address of your organization in the next column, and then your work setting, and then your scope of practice, and then the number of hours you have done so far for this employer. Once you meet the 450 hours is enough, and then your registration, and then a brief description of your work. So let's look at the example that the NMC gave. So for this example, the person has been working from 10th of December 2010 to current, and the name of the hospital is London Hospital, London Road, and the work setting is a hospital. So let's look at the types of work settings. So you can be working in the ambulance service, care home sector. So if you're in a care home sector, you write care home sector over there for the work setting. Consultancy, cosmetic or aesthetic sector, governing body or other leadership, GP practice or other primary care, hospital or other secondary care, inspectorate or regulator, because some people work in the NMC, right? Insurance or legal, and maternity, military, occupational health, the police, policy organization, prison, private domestic setting, even schools. There's so many work settings, so you put your work setting there. And then you also input your scope of practice. So let's look at examples of scopes of practice. We have direct clinical care, education, some people are nurse lecturers, research, management, leadership, policy, commissioning, consultancy. So whatever sector you are, you can put it there. So if you're in a care home or you're in a hospital, obviously it's direct clinical care. And your registration, are you a registered nurse? Are you a midwife? Are you a nursing associate? Are you a registered nurse midwife? What are you? You just put it there. All right, so that is an example. So this person wrote direct patient care as their scope of practice, and they have done full time of 37.5 hours per week. And this is the example the NMC gave. And your registration, you put nurse, the person is a nurse and midwife. And then the last column is a brief description of your work. So what do you do? So if you're in a care home nurse, let's look at what I put there for my care home nurse job. So in my care home, I wrote assessment of residents, preparations of care plans, administering of medicines, dressing of wounds, arranging admissions and discharge of residents, attending to medical emergencies, providing palliative and end-of-life care to residents. So that will be your brief description of your work. If you're in a hospital, what do you do? If you're a research nurse, what do you do? That's your description of your work. You put it there. And that's you done for the first part. Yes, for the very first chapter of the first part. That's you done. Let me also mention that, let's say you have just moved to an employer and you've only done 30 or let's say 100 hours with a new employer. Where were you before? So that would come second. So for me, for instance, if I had only done, let's say, less than the 450 practice hours for my NHS job, I could put that one as my current employer and just write that I have done, let's say, just 100 hours. And then at the second part, add my care home job, because that one I've been working there for so many years now. And so I'll definitely meet the 450 hours. So depending on the number of jobs that you have to put there so that you can catch up with the 450 hours, that's how you have to put there. But remember that the most current one comes first. So that's just an example. Now let's look at the second part of this one. So the second part is the CPD part. So the continuing professional development parts. So for this one as well, you'd have to put the dates, the method of the CPD. Was it online? Was it, self-learning? Was it a participatory? What was it? And then you put the topics that you learned there. And then you also put how that topic or thing you learned is linked to the code. And then how it is also linked to standards of proficiency. I'll talk about that. And then the number of hours, and then the number of participatory hours. So let's look at an example on the NMC website. So this person did an independent learning online. So for this one, the part that I found challenging is the date you did it. Because in the last 3-year period, you've probably done so many e-learnings, you've probably done so many trainings arranged by your employer and all of that. But did you put the date down? So that would be my first tip. Make sure that as a nurse, whenever you're going for training, whether it's an online e-learning, whatever, put it in a diary somewhere or in your notes section of your phone where you put the dates you had that training and then the topic it was and then what you learned. Just put it somewhere, just summary. All right. So for me, it was easy for me because I just moved to the NHS and so many trainings were arranged for me and all of them were in my email. So I could check the name of the course, the dates they asked me to go there and all of that. So for me, it was really easy. I had done all of that. But remember, it's not the last one she did. It's in the last 3-year period. So this person did it on the 4th, 2014. It was an independent learning online course. And then when it comes to the topics, the topic was clinical mandatory training. And so the person wrote updates for all clinical aspects relevant to my role, including blood transfusion, manual handling, and safeguarding. Some of what were covered I already knew, but it was good to refresh. I learned that there was a new blood transfusion policy and a new procedure for collecting blood from the fridge. I haven't done this in practice for a while, so it was important that I learned this. So they want you to not just write safeguarding, manual handling. They want you to write exactly what you learned and how it benefited your practice. And then when you come to the next column where they said the link to the code, in what way does this link to the code? So if you have forgotten about the code, let me remind you, and I'll leave a link for you to just go over the code. So with the code, I'm talking about the 4 P's. We're talking about practicing effectively, preserving safety, prioritizing people, and promoting professionalism and trust. So what part of the code is this course that you did linked to? So this person mentioned safeguarding and manual handling. So manual handling is a safety kind of thing so that you don't put your patients in danger when you're assisting them with their movement or mobility. It's a safety. So I would say it is preserving safety, and I'll also say it is practicing effectively. So the course can be linked to all 4 P's. You put them all there. It can be linked to just one. So what part of the code was this linked to? So you put it in that column, right? And then there's another thing that was not part in my last 3-year revalidation, but this one, it was there. So there's another column called linked to standards of proficiency. So how is this also linked to the standards of proficiency? So let me take you through the standards of proficiency. So here are the standards of proficiency. So we have being an accountable professional, promoting health and preventing ill health, assessing needs and planning care, providing and evaluating care, leading and managing nursing care and working in teams, improving safety and quality of care, coordinating care, communicating care. So there are about 7 of them. I'll leave them on the screen. So this course that you did, how is it also linked to the standards of proficiency that I just listed out? So this one wrote that it is linked to the aspect of being an accountable professional, and it is also linked to the aspect of improving safety and quality of care. And then you come to the number of hours. So how many hours was this training? So this person put 7.5 hours. And how many of it was it participatory? They said it was 0. So this person just learned it on their own on the e-learning. There was no asking of questions. There was no feeling and, all of that. So there was 0 participatory hours. So this person has met 7.5 hours out of the 35 required. But with regards to the 20 that is required for participatory, based on this learning, it was 0. So you write as many as you can, and immediately you hit the 35 CPD hours and 20 participatory participatory, you can end it there. So let's look at examples of the participatory that this person received. So with the participatory, the person put a course attendance and it was IV therapy. So for the topics that was learned, they put this course enabled me to learn the theory and practice behind IV therapy. Also got to practice aseptic non-touch technique. That's the ANTT. I have increased my knowledge and I'm now able to deliver IV therapy safely. What part of the 4 P's is this linked to? The person wrote practicing effectively and preserving safety. What part of the standards of proficiency is this linked to? The person wrote assessing needs and planning care and providing and evaluating care. How many hours was it? 7.5 hours, and all 7.5 hours were participatory. It was a course attendance. So this person has met that there. So that is an example. And I'll leave a link to this one in the description so you can just download and then have a look at it. So you do that until you meet your 35 CPD hours and 20 hours participatory. Now let's look at the next part. So the next part will be the feedback. So let's look at the feedback. So this is how the feedback also looks like. So an example of the feedback can be from patients you looked after. The feedback can be from your work colleagues. It can be from a senior. It can be from students. It can be from anything so far as it's related to your practice as a nurse or a midwife. So as well, the date of the feedback, who gave the feedback, and then how was the feedback? Was it through a thank you card? Was it verbal? Was it a written one? Was it through your annual appraisal at work? What kind of feedback was it? And then the content of the feedback. This one is very, very simple. What was the content? So let's look at one of mine. So this is one of mine that I wrote in my very first revalidation that I did. Yeah, this time I was working in a care home. So this was my feedback. So remember that you are not supposed to input the details of anybody in there. So if it's a patient, do not put the name of the patient or the name of the colleague or the name of the relative or whoever. You have to make sure that their data is protected. So I put there on the 5th of April 2021, this feedback was from a family of a man that I looked after, and it was a thank you card. And the content was, they were thanking me for the kindness, the care and emotional support I provided during the last few hours of life and even after the passing of their relative, highlighting how I showed respect for the wishes, privacy and dignity of their relative. So this is linked to the practicing effectively and promoting professionalism in the code. We'll reflect on this in one of my reflective accounts. So with the feedback as well, you can reflect on some of the feedbacks in your reflective accounts. Remember, you need 5 pieces of reflective accounts, okay, to reflect on. So that was for mine. Let's look at another example from the NMC website. So with the NMC website, this one is saying that 7th of May 2016, this was from a colleague and it was a verbal feedback. I asked a more experienced midwife on the ward to observe a breastfeeding support session I led and give me feedback. We talked about what I did well and some new ideas and techniques could include in my session. We'll reflect on this in one of my reflective accounts. So this was from a midwife. All right. So this is an example for the feedback part, and you need 5 of these. All right. Now let's look at the reflective account, and you need 5 pieces of this. So you can reflect on some of the feedbacks that you put in the feedback session in this part as well, or you can introduce new ones. So the reflective account so this is from a nurse who is in the cosmetic sector. So the feedback part, they want you to talk about the sector that it happened, and then what was the nature of the activity or the practice related feedback. What was the event that happened? And then what did you learn from this CPD activity or feedback experience? What did you learn? What lessons? And how is it going to change or improve your practice henceforth? And then how is this relevant to the code? So I think this is the part that takes a lot of time. So this part alone, you are given 5 accounts, and each 5 accounts, you have to talk about what happened, what was the feedback you got, what did you learn from it, how is this linked to the code, how is it changing your practice henceforth for each of the 5. So let's look at an example. So this is an experience from a clinic treatment day. During the pre-treatment discussion with the patient, when I asked if there were any changes to medical or drug history, the patient said there had not been any changes. Patient did not consider that taking oral low-dose aspirin was a medical or drug-related issue, and therefore did not inform us that 6 weeks ago she had commenced on prophylactic low-dose aspirin oral after reading an article in a newspaper. This resulted in her subsequent bleeding bruising during the elective procedure, which had to be abandoned. So what did she learn from it? She said, I learned that patients do not always have a clear understanding of the information we are requesting from them. I reflected on how we ask patients for general information. It is quite possible that patients do not consult with healthcare professionals when making choices. In this case, they read an article, purchased an OTC medication, and commenced self-medication. This highlights that patients may not consider self-medication either a medical or drug change and therefore would not report a change to us. So that's what she learned. So how did it change your practice after that? It says, reviews the written information we give to patients prior to treatment and introduced a risk assessment for bruising. This risk assessment includes a list of possible medications they may be taking and might not think to mention, such as low-dose aspirin, vitamin E supplements, cod liver oil capsules, etc. How is this relevant to the code? The person wrote, this is relevant to all principles of the code: prioritizing people, practicing effectively, preserving safety, promoting professionalism and trust. But in particular, practicing effectively, this experience is about communicating clearly and taking steps to ensure people understand what is being asked for them. And also linked to preserving safety. I took steps to reduce as far as possible any potential for harm associated with my practice by introducing a new risk assessment for bruising. So that is just an example. So let's look at one of my reflective accounts that I wrote my last 3 years one, right? So I wrote reflective account, nurse in a care home. What was the event or the incident? I wrote, a report was written following a thorough medication audit conducted in the care home I work by the pharmaceutical company that supplies the residents with their medications. It was discovered that several medications were not ordered on time, making residents miss some doses of their prescribed medications. Again, several, when required or PRN medications, had been continuously reordered when several boxes were already in stock. So what did you learn from this incident? On reflection, I felt we had endangered the lives of the residents in our care by not ordering their medications on time, and we had caused financial loss to the pharmacy and or the country by reordering medications which were not needed when probably they were needed by other people somewhere else. How did this change or improve your practice as a result? I wrote, I made a conscious effort to audit medications during my medication rounds, and the home also agreed that all medicines were to be audited at least weekly, which I adhered to in order to prevent similar situations occurring in the future. Medicines are now ordered before the last 7 days supply run out, and medications not needed are not reordered. How is this relevant to the code? I wrote, this is relevant to all 4 things of the code, or all 4 things of the code are linked to this practice related feedback, but more especially practicing effectively, making a conscious effort to ensure that the people in my care do not miss their prescribed medicines by ordering medicines on time can be considered as an effective way of practicing. It's also linked to preserving safety. The safety of residents in my care is therefore ensured since they are not likely to miss any medications which could be detrimental to their health. So I wrote 4 more pieces, and that was that for the reflective account, which is the difficult part of all of this. You have to think about it and link it to the code. Is it a case where you are prioritizing people? Is it a case where you are promoting professionalism and trust? Is it a case where you are preserving safety or practicing effectively? And how? Explain it. So let's go to the other part of it. So the other part is the reflective discussion. So this is what it means. So you must use this form to record your reflective discussion with another NMC registered nurse or midwife about your 5 written reflective accounts. During your discussion, you should not discuss patients, service users, or colleagues in a way that would identify them unless they expressively agree. And in the discussion summary section below, make sure you do not include any information that might identify a specific patient or service user. Please refer to the guidance. So you have to discuss all the reflective accounts with somebody. It could be another registered nurse, it could be a colleague, it could be a senior. From a webinar that I watched from the NMC, they said preferably a senior, but if you're band 9, who do you do it with, So preferably a senior, but a fellow colleague can also do it for you. However, it shouldn't be somebody that is your relative or your best friend who's a nurse, literally. It should be somebody that, can give you, constructive criticism and all of that. Also, it shouldn't be someone who's way lower than you. A student just comes or somebody who just qualified and you force the person to do it for you. No, it should be a colleague or somebody higher. So because you're going to ask you the name of this person and then the NMC pin of this person and then their details, okay? And then they are also going to put in a short summary of everything that you discussed and then sign for you. And then there's a confirmation form as well. So this confirmation form for somebody to go through to see that you have done everything that you said you have done. You have really done the CPD, you have really done the 450 hours, you have actually done the reflective accounts, the feedback, you've actually had the reflective discussion. So this can be the same person who did the reflective account discussion with you. This can be the confirmer as well, or it can be somebody else. All right. And then when you finish, they would ask you a few revalidation questions that have you really done this? You tick it and then you sign, or the manager signs. So when you finish, I think this is the easiest aspect of it. You go on to the NMC online and then you select that you want to do your revalidation. So when you select that you want to do your revalidation, they are going to ask you questions. When you come here, you can see that my NMC pin is obviously I can't show my pin, and then when my fee is expiring, so my fee is expiring the last day of January 2025. So my revalidation application deadline is the 1st of January. Like I said, the first day of the month your fee is expiring or your registration is due, and then renewal date is there as well. So you can request an extension if you want to, or you can go ahead and then click that you want to revalidate and then you click on next. So when you go there, if you have met all the requirements including the health and character ones, you just click that you want to revalidate and then you click that you have met all the requirements and you want to go ahead. If you want to lapse your registration, you go ahead. Let's say you don't want to register anymore, you're traveling, you do that. So I'll click registered nurse, revalidate, and then they'll ask you, are you currently practicing? You select yes. Are you practicing in the UK? You answer it. Your location, you put in your location, the country or whatever, and then the region. So they would ask you that, how are you employed? Are you self-employed? Are you employed through an agency? Are you self-employed? Is this your main practice? Blah, blah, blah. So you input all of that there. Your most recent date of practice, you input it there, the name of your employer, your scope of practice. So similar to the details you put in the first part of the revalidation that you did on your own. So you put it there and how many hours you have done and all of that. And then as well, you declare and you take yes that you have done all the required hours of the CPD, you've done the feedback, you've done the reflective account, and then you've had a reflective discussion, and you input the details of the person you had the discussion with over there. And then as well, you input the details of the person who was your confirmer. At this point, if your confirmer is the same as the person you had the reflective discussion with, that option would also come, and then you take that option. You input their details and their pin as well. They'll ask you to declare that you're of good character and that you've not had any police criminal offense or caution. And then they'll also ask you to confirm that you have a professional indemnity arrangement in place and all of that. And then they'll ask you the name of your professional body that you have this thing with. So you put RCN or whatever that you have, whatever union. You put if your revalidation was part of your annual appraisal or not, and all of that. And then you send it. They would ask you who did your confirmation for you. Is it the same person? And then they'll just do just a normal survey. Your gender, your religion, where you are from and all of that, your ethnicity. Then, your sexual orientation. Yes, are you gay? Are you bisexual? And all of that. It's just a survey. And then you submit it. And then they are saying that, thank you for submitting your revalidation application. If you need a paper copy of your application, click here. So according to some seniors, they say that it's always safe to just click there and get a paper copy of your revalidation. And then whenever you are due to pay your annual registration fee, it will be deducted. But if you don't have your direct debit, they will now ask for your details. And then they'll send you an email to confirm that you have submitted your revalidation, and that is it. So somebody will ask, what was the benefit of the whole thing that we did? So every year, randomly, some nurses are selected to submit their own. So that is why you have to finish with that before you do this part. Because when you do this part, you are confirming that you have done the parts that we spoke about earlier. The reflective accounts, the feedback, and all of that, CPD hours, and the discussions and all of that. If you confirm on the NMC website that you have done it and you have not done it, and immediately you submit, randomly your name is picked to submit it in the next 3 days or in the next 2 days, you panic, or email them your online version of it or soft copy of it, you will panic, So make sure you have done this part, because randomly you'll be selected. So if you think that you'd want to lapse your registration, let's say you want to stop being a nurse for a while, you can always lapse your registration. Or if you think that you need more time, you can always request one extension through their email. So make sure you have done that. How long did it take me to finish mine. So for me, I started around 9 a.m. and I finished around 2, or let me say 3. I could have finished around 2 because when I was done, I needed to call my reflective discussion partner to tell them that this is what I have done and to ask them for their pin to put there as well. And this person was not responding to their phone call at the time, so it took a while for me to get their permission to, and go through with them to put their details and their address, their pin, their full name, their email and everything there. Remember that the NMC has these details and can immediately call the person and ask some of the things that you put there. Make sure that you're really doing them. Some of the tips that I would say is that as a nurse, you know very well that you would want to keep your name on the register. So as you are going about your stuff, for me, I even have a whole file on my tablet known as Revalidation. So it's a revalidation page. So I always put all my trainings that I have had on there. I put the title on my iPad. I put the title, I put the dates, the time, the lessons I learned, the in-person ones. I always put it there. And whenever I have issues as well, I put it there so that I can reflect on them. But the thing is, because I just got a new job, I've had so many feedbacks, I've had so many trainings, so I just use the recent ones. But remember that is a last 3-year period. So basically, this is all you need for your revalidation, guys. Every single thing you need. If there's anything that I forgot to mention, please leave them below. All other resources will be in the description. Comments if this was helpful or not. Thank you so much. Bye.